So I hope you took a break to think about the aspects of the biomedical and biopsychosocial models of health. What we see is that the biomedical model, sees health as being beyond the control of the individual, even in terms of treatment, which requires medical professionals. In contrast, the biopsychosocial model sees health as something that can, at least in part, be in control of the individual, in partnership with their provider and others who are important to them. Here we see that the biomedical model views health as a dichotomy, healthy or not, where the physical is not impacted by the psychological or social conditions. In contrast, the biopsychosocial model views health as being on a cyclical continuum, wherein the mind and body consistently and continually interact. Similar to the biopsychosocial model is the social ecological framework, which is used more often in public health and is based on psychological theory. Here's an example of how the social ecological framework can be applied to a health issue. In a study by Boyington conducted an interview study to better understand attitudes and perceptions towards weight, diet, and physical activity among young African American women. What they found was that participants' perceptions of weight and healthy behaviors were primarily determined by their environment and personal preferences, resulting in recommendations that multi-levels, individual, interpersonal, organizational, community, and population be considered when developing healthy weight interventions. Specifically, they found that at the individual level, genetics, gender, food preferences, and self-perceptions were important. For example, participants discussed being desensitized to negative comments about their weight, how being skinny was not in their best interest. At the interpersonal level, family, friends, and role models were very important and even superseded their individual level preferences. For example, not passing up on a big Sunday meal, even if they knew it would be less healthful to them. At the organizational level, participants discussed their difficulties with accessing healthy foods, such as those in their school cafeterias and the lack of access to school-sponsored physical activities. And at the community level, cultural norms regarding food preparation, exercise, and body size were also important. So with these findings, we can start to see how interventions that include and go beyond the individual are important when addressing issues related to diet and physical activity. The biopsychosocial model or social ecological model of health helps us to understand many aspects of our work, including how we assess an issue, how we intervene, and how we can evaluate our interventions of success. Imagine Mr. Brown from our case study. By applying the biopsychosocial model, a provider or clinician could analyze Mr. Brown's problem by assessing not only the biological, but also psychological and social factors that may contribute to his heart disease. Per this assessment, what is the best way to intervene? Does Mr. Brown require only medication, which is biological, or perhaps does he also need help with reducing his stress levels, maybe psychological? Possibly he needs some social support or access to community-based resources at the social level. Possibly the intervention needs to address all of these factors. Finally, given the intervention, how can we evaluate the intervention's success for Mr. Brown? Would success pertain to Mr. Brown's physical, mental, or social well-being? Possibly all three would be evaluated. Of course, this is just a simple example, but it gives an idea of how useful health models can be. Another complex example is whether or not video game playing causes violent behaviors. Research has shown a link between violent video game playing and aggressive behavior and lower pro-social behavior and empathy. But there's no proof that violent games actually cause people to commit violence or criminal acts. In fact, between 1996 and 2011, violence by youths decreased, even as video games became more violent. Still, people remember in 2012 the horrible shootings that took place at the Sandy Hook Elementary School, where in 2012, Adam Lanza shot and killed 20 children and 6 teachers. Lanza was obsessed with violent video games, and in response, Congress called for restrictions on them. But an American Psychological Association report looked into this and concluded it was premature to blame video games for violent tendencies. In fact, there was not one single risk factor that leads a person to act aggressively or violently. There are many. Again, people and behaviors are complex. So this begs the question, what other factors might be associated with violence or violent behavior among violent video game players? Would they be similar for all groups, regardless of gender, race, socioeconomic level, and education level? This is how the biopsychosocial model can help us with problem analysis, intervention development, and intervention evaluation. So, our first chapter has provided a good introduction to what we'll be discussing this semester. To end the week, I'd like you to try your hand at applying the biopsychosocial model to the issue of childhood obesity. Use the assignment provided on Blackboard and see how this goes. Enjoy.